Former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh has passed away at the age of 92. He was admitted at the emergency department of AIIMS last night. He served as India's Prime Minister from 2004 to 2014, a period marked by significant economic and social reforms. Manmohan Singh served as the Finance Minister in P.V. Narasimha Rao's government between 1991 to 1996, which is seen largely as an era of India's economic liberalization. The policies framed in that era led to India becoming the world's fastest-growing major economy. As the Prime Minister, he led the signing of the US-India Civil Nuclear Agreement, ending India's nuclear isolation, and introduced the Right to Information Act, promoting transparency in governance. His administration also enacted the Manrega, aiming to provide employment to rural households. So that is, of course, the legacy that late Dr. Manmohan Singh has left behind. We're, of course, tracking the story with all our reporters spread across. Let me go across to my colleague Vasudha, who is joining us from the Congress headquarters. Vasudha, we've, of course, seen all the tributes pouring in. There are several leaders who are visiting Manmohan Singh's residence here in the national capital to pay their last respects ever since the news broke. Tell us about at the Congress office where you are. We've, of course, seen Rahul Gandhi and Priyanka Gandhi also visiting Manmohan Singh's house just a short while back.
Absolutely, Tanima. The famous last words of Manmohan Singh in one of his last interviews, where he said that history will be kinder to him, and he in fact anticipated the kind of outpouring of tributes to him because he leaves behind a rich legacy, not just in the field of policy but also in the realm of governance and also politics. Somebody who was non-confrontational, somebody who was mild-mannered, who led a life of quiet dignity and whose accomplishments outshone that of his defectors and also, his own opponents. And today at the Congress office, there is, of course, a lot of quiet here, also because, Tanima, the timing of his passing away, comes at a very challenging time for the Congress party. The Congress has had successive defeats in both Haryana and in Madhya Pradesh and in Maharashtra. It was expected to start this Ambedkar Yatra, optimizing on the kind of controversy centered around B.R. Ambedkar based on a part of Home Minister Amit Shah's speech. That Yatra has now been put off. There's also the Belagavi CWC meeting of the Congress party that was held to commemorate the first and the only Congress party CWC meet that was headed by Mahatma Gandhi. That also, could not take off. In fact, leaders are, returning to Delhi right now. And his mortal remains will be brought to the Congress office tomorrow because the family of Dr. Manmohan Singh is waiting for one of his daughters to return to India. She'll be arriving tonight, is what we've been told. And tomorrow is when the final journey, the final rites of former Prime Minister of India for 2 terms, also somebody who held very important positions such as the Governor of RBI, the head of UGC, and also Deputy Chairperson of the Planning Commission, somebody who has advised Prime Ministers not just on economy but also on foreign policy. Dr. Manmohan Singh's his final journey is expected to begin tomorrow, and his mortal remains will also be brought to the Congress office tomorrow. And this location is particularly significant because this marks, this marks an important part of his political career. He has always remained devoted to his to this party, a parliamentarian of 33 years, somebody whose political positioning was very clear, unlike that of several of his contemporaries. But he also knew that there was a responsibility he had, and maybe the sharing of authority was not completely, in his favor, because there were many important decisions that were taken by Sonia Gandhi as the chairperson of the UPA and also the chairperson of the National Advisory Council then. But Manmohan Singh, to his credit, also brought in very important legislations, including RTI, RTE, the Rural Health Mission, the Unique Identification authority, which also led to Aadhaar becoming a national identity of sorts, and more importantly, his signature on the nuclear deal, ending the nuclear isolation and winter for India, and establishing India as a responsible nuclear weapons state, clearly showing that he had autonomy and agency in some matters when it came to governance. But somebody who was mild-mannered, somebody who was a different breed of politicians, somebody whose accomplishments outshone that of his rivals.
Right, Vasudha, as we know that Late Manmohan Singh, in fact, retired from public life in a way earlier this year. But also, if you could just talk to us about the fact that several of his policies that he framed, whether it was in terms of the economy as well as in terms of positioning India as a country to be reckoned with in the global stage, those are some of the policies that the Modi government had built on later.
Absolutely, Tanima. His enduring legacy is, of course, of the time when he became the finance minister of the country in 1991, when he did bring in, the very important liberalization reforms. And at that time, it would have seemed like that was the only option, because our forex reserves had hit a historic low. Our fiscal deficit was very high. But steering the country, through the whole IMF bailout was a very challenging task, opening the world to India, and also opening India to the world, and more importantly, deregulation of the economy, making ease of business, a prevalent theme there, and also cutting the license raj to size was not easy, and probably it wasn't appreciated as it should have been, because Congress did not get the right kind of numbers to form the government in 1996. But of course, now he's given credit for bringing India to the world stage, for helping us have that seat on the global high table. Dr. S. Jaishankar, the External Affairs Minister, specifically credited him for improving relations with the West, which also is one of his accomplishments, because he built relations with the United States of America when it was a unipolar world. The Soviet Union had collapsed, and of course this civil nuclear deal, which ended the nuclear isolation and winter for India, establishing India as one of those responsible nuclear weapon state at a time when the left was going to walk out of the alliance, was also something that was symptomatic of Manmohan Singh's political astuteness, because he got the Samajwadi Party on his side then.
Right. Vasudha, stay with us. I'm also joined by my colleague Sunil Prabhu, who is joining us from outside Manmohan Singh's house here in the national capital. Sunil, as we've seen, a number of leaders have in fact trooped in since the morning to Manmohan Singh's house to pay their condolences to his family, to pay their last respects as well. And across party lines, we've seen the kind of messages that have poured in for him, despite being under a lot of pressure, especially during his second tenure as the Prime Minister. We've seen that everybody has, in a way, recognized the kind of contributions that he made for the country's development and growth.
Absolutely. Not only from within India, but internationally, I think everybody mourns the loss of, our former Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh. He played a critical role, and the person that he was, he never was harsh or critical to anybody. Cutting across party lines. He had, built that bipartisan support, which is sadly missed today. Is something that he was able to nurture right through his tenure, through the toughest of times. Not many will ever be able to understand that deep, close, personal, as well as important relationship that Dr. Manmohan Singh had with the UPA chairperson, Sonia Gandhi. Much has been written about it, but as Dr. Manmohan Singh told me very clearly, in many ways, he was always and extremely grateful to her for having chosen her as the Prime Minister, and how he ensured that whatever he did would be for the greater, not only for the country, but for the party for which he remained as a steadfast member right to his death for 33 years. Even in the run-up to 2024, he made a critical remark about what I was talking about, bipartisan support, the public discourse that had been made by, the people in power against him, that this is something that is extremely upsetting and deeply worrying. Dr. Manmohan Singh never minced words about speaking the truth about certain issues, and I think today it's a great tribute for him that cutting across party lines, not only nationally but internationally, countries are paying their homage to who has seen, and this country will take a long time to understand, just like they're now rediscovering Baba Sahib Ambedkar and his being the father of the Constitution. Dr. Manmohan Singh in the years to come will be seen as the father of not only economic reforms, but of India's enlightened national interest in terms of strategic development in the world that we live in.
Right. Right, Sunil, as you were mentioning over there, that Manmohan Singh in a press conference, and he actually spoke to you about that. He answered your question rather about that, the fact that history will remember him more kindly than the media, the questions that the media were in a way throwing at him at that point in time. Especially as we were saying that while he has, of course, his larger legacies, of course, the economic reforms and the kind of initiatives that he had, in fact, introduced in his first tenure as the Prime Minister. The second tenure, there was, of course, a lot of challenges that the Congress government faced in terms of the corruption cases that were filed at that point in time. But we have, in fact, seen that he was, in a way, epitomizing grace under pressure even at that point in time. And as we were talking about the fact that he had, in fact, said that in retrospect, he will be remembered more kindly, even for that particular period.
Well, I don't know whether I was the one or what. It's a memory. It's a long term. But whatever be as what you say about whatever happened during that period, I think nobody ever personally could lift a finger against Dr. Manmohan Singh about his personal credibility, about how he was incorruptible. He's been, I think, India's finance minister even before you were probably born.
I'm sorry to interrupt you there, Sunil. We'll cut across now to Farooq Abdullah, who's speaking at the moment.
मैं अपनी तरफ से, अपनी जमात की तरफ से, अपने ख़ानदान की तरफ से उन्हें श्रद्धांजलि पेश करता हूँ और उम्मीद करता हूँ कि जो काम छोड़ गए हैं बाकी वो हम लोग और दूसरे उसको पूरा कर सकेंगे और इस मुल्क को आगे ले सकें और भाईचारा रखें देशों के साथ।
डॉक्टर साहब, चूंकि जैसे आपने खुद कहा एक इकोनॉमिस्ट थे, क्योंकि ऑक्सफोर्ड यूनिवर्सिटी उनकी फिलॉसफी भी थी और कैम्ब्रिज यूनिवर्सिटी उन्हें जो इकोनॉमी में एक अलग ही एक्सपीरियंस भी थी, जिसकी वजह से हमारे मुल्क की सालमियत एक अलग लेवल पर आ गई थी। एक ऐसा भी
Right, that was, of course, Farooq Abdullah of the National Conference. But let me also, I believe we are being joined by Selja Kumari of the Congress. Ma'am, thank you so much for speaking to us here on NDTV. Ma'am, your last meeting with Dr. Manmohan Singh, if you could just share us a little bit about that.
Well, I went to see him in his house. Of course, we worked together for a long time during Narasimha Rao ji's Prime Ministership when Dr. Manmohan Singh was Finance Minister. And then, of course, when he was Prime Minister and I was a minister in his council. So we worked together for a long time. And I was always struck by his humility and the way he was always willing to help you out in any situation. I remember when I saw him, it was not very well in his house and discussing everything about the party, about the country. And he seemed very concerned the direction which the country was taking. But he was always very humble, very decent, very, very decent. Never used a word out of place.
What kind of, we've of course seen the kind of overarching legacy that Dr. Manmohan Singh has left behind. But in terms of Congress, in terms of the party and the younger leaders of the party like you, what kind of an influence do you think he's had on you and your colleagues?
Let me tell you, once I remember when he was the finance minister, at that time, there was some work in the finance ministry. And then I asked him and he said, yes, I'll help you out. And, then to be honest, I forgot about it. He met me after, I think, 2 or 3 weeks in the lobby and he said, yeah, what about that work that you were referring to? So, I was greatly humbled. I was greatly humbled by his demeanor and his, of course, everyone talks of his intelligence, his humility, and they were all so true, so true. Even when you were stuck in something, some policy or something regarding your ministry, he would always be the guiding light.
Right. Ma'am, of course, even in the recent times, due to his failing health, he was not so active in public politics, but he was always there as a guiding light in Congress. If you could just share us a few memories of, in the recent years, the kind of interactions that you've had or people in the Congress have had with late Dr. Manmohan Singh, especially to understand, the kind of legacy that he has had during his tenure as the Prime Minister of the country.
Yes, because we were in the opposition after 2014, and he used to come to Parliament, to Rajya Sabha quite often. I was also in Rajya Sabha at that time. And, again, he would stand up and wherever needed, never a word out of place, but very sharp intellect. And he would place the government on the mat, but in a very, very decent way. And whenever we interacted, he used to be very concerned at the direction the country was taking. But he was always very, I would also say that he would not just criticize for the sake of criticizing. He was always there, even which I think the government perhaps did not heed to that. He was always there to also support, extend cooperation in the interest of the country.
Right. Ma'am, this criticism has always come from the opposition at that time, of course, that he was always seen as a foil to Sonia Gandhi. The fact that the real authority actually lay with Mrs. Gandhi than with him when he was the Prime Minister. But as an insider, what would you say to those critics today?
The media at that time, if you remember, was very, very unkind. And they did try to run him down, but being witness to so many things during the government at that time, Mrs. Gandhi extended all possible courtesies to him. And he, because of his own personality, was very respectful of her. And I think it worked extremely well. You'll never see this kind of an example in history otherwise, that the way both of them worked together, Madam in her sagacity with her, whatever she could give support, whether it was in government or in the party, Madam gave all support to him. And he was very respectful, but in the government, he knew exactly what needs to be done, what needed to be done. And I'm sure that they discussed all those things between themselves.
Right. Especially during the second tenure of UPA2, when he was the Prime Minister, then Ms. Selja, there's also been a lot of pressure on him at the time, especially because of all the cases that had been filed at that point. But you, again, having worked so closely with the late Dr. Singh at that point in time, if you could just share us a few anecdotes, if you have, as to how he handled that kind of pressure. As you said, that even he spoke about it, the fact that the media then was more unkind to him. But if you could just share us a few inside glimpses.
Yeah. I remember the second tenure, especially, when there was this dharna in Delhi and all these opposition parties joined hands. But he could handle it. I remember even in the cabinet, we used to discuss as to how to handle. Tata was there, Pranab Mukherjee Saab was there, and there was a particular situation which arose. But I think what I used to see was that he was willing to take advice from everybody, whether it was Sharad Pawarji, whether it was Dada, whether it was, even we were not as senior as those leaders, but whenever we had any suggestion to offer, he would listen very, very carefully. And in the cabinet, it was not that everybody else kept quiet. So we all used to give our views, and he used to listen to everyone. We were all given time to air our views.
Right. Ms. Kumari Selja also wanted to ask about the fact, and we are, of course, playing out sort of some of those excerpts today as well. He was, of course, largely known as, and a lot of people have written about it, that he was known as a silent prime minister, was not somebody who used to give a lot of speeches, but the kind of speeches that we have seen coming in from him in the parliament, also that very important, very memorable, in a way, interactive speech that we saw with Sushma Swaraj back in the day in the parliament. Also, if you could just share your memories of the late Dr. Manmohan Singh as the Prime Minister and his speeches in the Parliament.
You know, they came. Yeah, sorry. They came from a generation, you know, where Sher-o Shairi was quite, you know, everyone used shares and couplets and to express their views. And he was very good at it. He was very good at it. You know, I mean, I remember my father's generation. They were very good with all the Sher-o Shairi poetry, and they would express their views. And that was another side of him. Of course, most people saw him as someone very serious, somber. But during our interactions, he would laugh. He would laugh also at times, and people would be very surprised. But, you know, he had both kind of backgrounds. He came from a humble background, like most of our parents, rose up. Of course, he worked hard, and because of his intelligence, diligence, he reached where he did. He was also a bureaucrat, a technocrat, but there was also this, you know, he had this political vein in him, which would make him understand the political nuances of what was happening all around, and he could deal with it very well. The party worked very well together with Mrs. Gandhi's guidance and his expertise.
Right, Selja Kumari there of the Congress, sharing her thoughts and her interactions with late Dr. Manmohan Singh. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. I'm also now joined by two guests, Aditi Fadnis, senior journalist, and Sandeep Shastri, director of academics in Nit Education. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us on the show. Even today, you know, if you see, that was, of course, Selja Kumari of the Congress, but people from across party lines, Aditi Fadnis, we can see are, you know, when they remember Dr. Manmohan Singh, they, of course, see him as a gentleman politician, somebody who was not very communicative, so to speak, and maybe in today's standards, but then nonetheless was seen as a very effective statesman, somebody who even the world leaders, the kind of tributes that we are seeing coming in from international leaders and dignitaries, also in a way clearly shows how he was remembered because of the kind of legacy and the contribution that he has made for India's growth over the years, and which is something that politicians across the party lines recognize even today.
Absolutely, I think we have to just cut his as in politics. Just divide his career into three phases. One during his phase as finance minister, the second as in the first phase of the UPA government, and the second in the third phase of the second phase of the UPA government. So if you look at his role as finance minister, of course, I mean, India was going through extremely challenging times, and I shudder to think what would have happened if someone other than he had been the finance minister. He, you know, could call any international leader. He had such high credentials that I remember President Obama saying that the only person for whom global leaders at a G8 meeting stood up to applaud, it was Manmohan Singh. So he was I mean, he could, frankly, the kind of tributes that are pouring in from international leaders who were finance ministers at the same time as him, Anwar Ibrahim, for instance, who was a Malaysian finance minister at that time. The kind of tribute and the tone of the tribute, well, it's something that I'm sure all leaders really aspire for. Dr. Manmohan Singh was an extraordinary individual, an extraordinary human being, both for the qualities of heart and head. And there are very few like him today in India.
Dr. Sandeep Shastri, if I can bring you in as well, you know, when we talk about Manmohan Singh's legacy, we of course see him primarily as being the economist prime minister. the kind of long-lasting impact, something that the current government is also building on, even as we speak today, in terms of the foreign policies as well as, of course, the economic policies as well. But according to you, what do you think has been the biggest impact that Manmohan Singh had as a Prime Minister?
I think the most significant contribution which Dr. Manmohan Singh made was the way he brought turnarounds during critical moments. I see three phases in his career. One, before he became finance minister, when he headed organizations like the UGC or the Reserve Bank and did a splendid job there. And then as finance minister and finally as prime minister. In each of these three phases of his public life, you see immense contribution in terms of a turnaround that he created. The turnaround he was responsible for in education when he was chairman of UGC, the turnaround in the banking system when he was governor of Reserve Bank, the economic reforms that he introduced as the finance minister of the country, and finally, as a prime minister, the resolving of coalition contradictions, the accepting of responsibility and very silently, in a very self-effacing manner, leading a coalition. I remember one reference made. He was like the one who drank the poison in order to save the image of a government and a party he was leading. Now, that was the type of person that Dr. Manmohan Singh was, an intellectual giant and somebody who involved himself in politics not like a typical politician, somebody who spoke very little, but whatever he spoke made tremendous sense and was always remembered and recalled by people. And the final point I'd like to make is even criticisms of Manmohan Singh are often not about Manmohan Singh as an individual, but people have used his shoulder to shoot at other things which they would like to oppose. But when it comes to Dr. Manmohan Singh as a person, I think there is respect for him across political parties in India and across leaders in the world, because they understood the depth of his knowledge and wisdom and his capacity to take people with him and the wonderful human being ultimately that he was. And this was something which everybody who interacted with him got an opportunity to see. I think when history records the last decade of the 21st century and the last decade of the 20th century and the first decade of the 21st century, I think there will be much, 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 much more credit that would be given to the contribution of Dr. Manmohan Singh.
Right. Aditi Fadnis, coming back to you, while you were, of course, covering some of the events of Congress and also during the UPA era, did you also see that he was, in a way, largely overshadowed in decision-making in Congress? Because that has been, of course, something that has been written about him. We've also seen movies being made about that. But what we have, in fact, seen, and Dr. Manmohan Singh himself has also talked about it in a very minimalistic manner that is known of him, that is characteristic of him. The fact that he was also, it's not like that it has to be interpreted like that. It was seen as a bond that was shared between Sonia Gandhi and him that led to the way that UPA era was the way that UPA era in fact unfolded, rather than the manner in which it has been portrayed in popular forums.
Well, I totally agree with Dr. Shastri about the whole the evaluation of Dr. Singh. Certainly, there were people who were using the relationship between Dr. Manmohan Singh and Sonia Gandhi, two power centers in politics can never work properly. So there were people who were using one to score points against the other, and that happened a lot. I mean, Sonia Gandhi came into politics at a time when she felt that Rajiv Gandhi's legacy was being ignored. She led the Congress to victory in many ways. And Dr. Manmohan Singh was, many saw him as a recipient of work that actually she had done, and used this to try to drive a wedge between the two centers of power that existed at the time. So he was taking, I mean, the government was taking a decision, but they emphasized that it could be overruled anytime by a lady who lives just down the road at 10 Janpath. This was obviously undermining the Prime Minister's authority, an attempt to do that, and also to get things done which he would not have advised done. I mean, he was not going to ring up 10 Janpath to find out if Sonia Gandhi had actually asked for this, that, or the other decision to be taken.
Right.
Dr. Manmohan Singh tried his best. He really tried to navigate the complicated paths of politics. But as I said earlier, he was really swimming in a sea of sharks. And it was not easy for him always to get on top of the situation, particularly when there were a whole lot of people trying to manipulate the situation to their advantage.
Right. Aditi Fadnis, Sandeep Shastri, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. Let's also listen in to what Prime Minister Narendra Modi had to say about late Dr. Manmohan Singh.
पूर्व प्रधानमंत्री डॉक्टर मनमोहन सिंह जी के निधन ने हम सभी के हृदय को गहरी पीड़ा पहुंचाई है। उनका जाना एक राष्ट्र के रूप में भी हमारे लिए बहुत बड़ी क्षति है। विभाजन के उस दौर में बहुत कुछ खोकर भारत आना और यहां जीवन के हर क्षेत्र में उपलब्धियां हासिल करना ये सामान्य बात नहीं है। अभावों और संघर्षों से ऊपर उठकर कैसे ऊंचाइयों को हासिल किया जा सकता है, उनका जीवन ये सीख भावी पीढ़ी को देता रहेगा। एक नेक इंसान के रूप में, एक विद्वान अर्थशास्त्री के रूप में और रिफॉर्म्स के प्रति समर्पित लीडर के रूप में उन्हें हमेशा याद किया जाएगा। एक अर्थशास्त्री के रूप में उन्होंने अलग अलग स्तर पर भारत सरकार में अनेक सेवाएं दी। एक चुनौतीपूर्ण समय में उन्होंने रिजर्व बैंक के गवर्नर की भूमिका निभाई। पूर्व प्रधानमंत्री भारत रत्न श्री पीवी नरसिम्हा राव जी की सरकार के वित्त मंत्री रहते हुए उन्होंने वित्तीय संकट से घिरे देश को एक नई अर्थव्यवस्था के मार्ग पर प्रशस्त किया। प्रधानमंत्री के रूप में देश के विकास में और प्रगति में उनके योगदान को हमेशा याद किया जाएगा। जनता के प्रति, देश के विकास के प्रति उनका जो कमिटमेंट था उसे हमेशा बहुत सम्मान से देखा जाएगा। डॉक्टर मनमोहन सिंह जी का जीवन उनकी ईमानदारी और सादगी का प्रतिबिंब था। वो विलक्षण सांसद थे। उनकी विनम्रता, सौम्यता और उनकी बौद्धिकता उनके संसदीय जीवन की पहचान बनी। मुझे याद है कि इस साल की शुरुआत में जब राज्यसभा में उनका कार्यकाल समाप्त हुआ, तब मैंने कहा था कि सांसद के रूप में डॉक्टर साहब की निष्ठा सभी के लिए प्रेरणा जैसी है। सत्र के समय अहम मौकों पर वो व्हीलचेयर पर बैठकर आते थे, अपना संसदीय दायित्व निभाते थे। दुनिया के प्रतिष्ठित संस्थानों की शिक्षा लेने और सरकार के अनेक शीर्ष पदों पर रहने के बाद भी वो अपनी सामान्य पृष्ठभूमि के मूल्यों को कभी भी नहीं भूले। उन्होंने हमेशा हर दल के व्यक्ति से संपर्क रखा, सबके लिए सहज उपलब्ध रहे। जब मैं मुख्यमंत्री था तब डॉक्टर मनमोहन सिंह जी के साथ राष्ट्रीय और अंतर्राष्ट्रीय अनेक विषयों पर उनसे खुले मन से चर्चाएं होती थी। यहां दिल्ली आने के बाद भी मेरी उनसे समय समय पर बात होती थी, मुलाकात होती थी। मुझे उनसे हुई मुलाकातें, देश को लेकर हुई चर्चाएं हमेशा याद रहेगी। अभी जब उनका जन्मदिन था तब भी मैंने उनसे बात की थी। आज इस कठिन घड़ी में मैं उनके परिवार के प्रति अपनी संवेदनाएं व्यक्त करता हूं। मैं डॉक्टर मनमोहन सिंह जी को सभी देशवासियों की तरफ से श्रद्धांजलि अर्पित करता हूं।